The cathedral smelled like roses and expensive perfume. Marcus Santoro stood at the altar in a charcoal suit that cost more than most people's cars, his dark eyes fixed on the aisle where Elena would emerge. 3 years without her. 3 years since Catherine died. The grief had become a permanent weight in his chest, something he'd learned to carry like a suit jacket. Elena appeared, and she was perfect. Blonde, delicate, the kind of woman who looked at a man like he was the center of the universe. She'd found him at his lowest point 6 months ago at a charity gala. He'd gone out of obligation. She'd approached him with such genuine kindness that for the first time since Catherine's death, he'd felt something other than emptiness. The priest began the ceremony. 500 guests watched. Politicians, business partners, men from the underworld who'd come to pay respects to the Santoro name. That's when Marcus felt it, a hand on his sleeve, old, weathered, insistent. He turned slightly and saw an elderly woman he didn't recognize. Her gray eyes were sharp, urgent. She leaned close, her whisper barely audible. "She's not who you think she is. Don't say yes. Please." The priest was waiting. Elena smiled at him, radiant and trusting. Marcus's world tilted. The whisper should have been easy to dismiss. A confused guest, perhaps someone's elderly relative who'd wandered to the wrong place. But Marcus had built his empire on reading people, on sensing when something was fundamentally wrong, and this woman's fear had been real. He looked at her face, truly looked. There was something familiar about the sharp set of her jaw, the way her eyes held knowledge that didn't belong to her. "I'm sorry," he said quietly to the priest. "Give me 1 moment." Elena's smile faltered. "Marcus, what are you—" He guided the old woman to a side corridor, away from the cathedral's noise. Up close, he could see the fine lines of her face, the tremor in her hands. "Who are you?" he asked. "My name is Rosa Marinello." She said it like it should mean something. "I knew your wife, Catherine. We were friends, a long time ago." Marcus's chest tightened. "Catherine died 3 years ago. I know, and I know who killed her." Rosa's voice was steady now, controlled. "It wasn't a heart attack, Marcus. It was poison, slow, undetectable. And the woman you're about to marry, she administered it, day by day for months." The world didn't tilt this time, it shattered. Marcus steadied himself against the stone wall. His mind rejected the words as something deeper, the part of him that had always known Catherine's death was too convenient, recognized the ring of truth. "That's impossible," he said, but his voice was hollow. "Catherine knew," Rosa continued quietly. "She figured it out near the end. She recorded everything, the conversations, the injections. She left it all for you, hidden where only you would look. But Marcus was so broken after she died, you never searched." "Where?" The word came out like a weapon. "Her jewelry box, the compartment underneath. But Marcus," Rosa gripped his arm, "Elena is not working alone. There are others, people who want the Santoro empire fractured. She's the first move in a much larger game." From inside the cathedral, someone called his name, the priest, impatient, Elena, waiting. "If I walk back in there and say no, she'll run, the evidence will disappear," he thought aloud. "Yes, and I need to play along." He met Rosa's eyes, just long enough to find what Catherine left behind, just long enough to understand who I'm really marrying. Rosa nodded slowly. "I'll help you, but Marcus, be careful. A woman like Elena doesn't fail. She has contingencies. She has people watching." He returned to the cathedral, his hand steady as he took Elena's. She whispered something that should have sounded tender, but now sounded calculated. And as he said the words that would bind them together, Marcus Santoro made a silent promise to Catherine. He would find the truth, whatever it cost. The wedding reception was a blur of champagne and congratulations. Marcus moved through it like a ghost, shaking hands, accepting embraces, all while his mind churned. Catherine's jewelry box, hidden compartment. He hadn't touched her things in 3 years. After she died, he'd locked her bedroom and walked away. It was easier than facing the empty spaces she'd left behind. At midnight, he excused himself. Elena was occupied with her bridesmaids, laughing that practiced laugh he now heard as something else entirely. Performance, manipulation, a predator's mask. The master bedroom was exactly as Catherine had left it. Her perfume still lingered on the air. Marcus moved to the vanity, his hands trembling as he lifted the jewelry box, mahogany with ivory inlay, a gift from his father. He found the compartment, a single button hidden beneath the velvet lining. It clicked open. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten letter in Catherine's careful script. Just holding it made something crack inside his chest. He hadn't seen her handwriting in so long. My dearest Marcus, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if you're reading this, you need to know the truth. Elena Rossi isn't who she claims to be. She came into our lives deliberately. She's been poisoning me for 8 months. I have recorded everything. Marcus sank onto the bed, the letter shaking in his hands. His wife had known. She'd suffered in silence while he worked, while he built his empire, while he remained oblivious. A sound at the door made him freeze. Elena stood in the doorway, still in her wedding dress, her expression unreadable. "Hello, darling," she said softly. "I was wondering when you'd find that." Marcus pocketed the USB and letter in one fluid motion, his years of deception lending him steady hands. "I came to find something of Catherine's, a keepsake for tonight." Elena stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. She moved with a grace that suddenly seemed predatory, each step calculated, purposeful. The bride's smile had vanished. What remained was something sharper, colder. "How touching," she said. Catherine would have appreciated that sentiment. She was always so sentimental. The way she said Catherine's name, not with affection but with contempt, confirmed everything Rosa had claimed. "You knew her well?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice neutral. "Better than you did, apparently." Elena sat on the edge of the bed, crossing her legs. "You were always so busy building your empire, Marcus, working late, taking trips. Poor Catherine was so lonely, so vulnerable." She was baiting him, testing how much he knew. "And you offered her companionship?" he said. "I offered her a friend, someone who listened, someone who cared." Elena's eyes gleamed with something that wasn't madness. Worse, it was calculation. "It was almost too easy. She trusted me completely. She even told me about your private affairs, your enemies, your weaknesses." Marcus's jaw tightened. Catherine wouldn't have betrayed him intentionally, but a lonely woman confiding in a trusted friend, of course she would. "Why tell me this?" he asked. Elena smiled. "Because you're smart enough to know I'm going to deny everything. Because I have Catherine's death certified as natural causes. Because nobody will believe the grieving husband over his new wife." She stood, moving closer. "Because I've already won, Marcus. Catherine is dead. You're broken. And now I control everything." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers cold. "Welcome to your new life." Elena left the room, her laughter echoing down the hallway. Marcus remained perfectly still, his mind calculating angles, risks, contingencies. She was right about one thing. Her word against his would be a losing game. Authorities would side with the grieving husband's new bride. The crime had been hidden for 3 years. But Catherine gave him a gift. He waited until 3 a.m., until the mansion fell silent. Then he made his way to his private office and locked the door. The USB drive slid into his computer with a soft click. What he found made his blood run cold. Videos, audio recordings, photographs. Catherine, pale and growing weaker, documenting each interaction with Elena. The injections masked as vitamin supplements. The conversations where Elena spoke about timing, about patience, about the Santoro fortune waiting on the other side of his grief. And there were names, bank transfers, communications with someone identified only as the architect, whoever orchestrated Catherine's death. Elena wasn't working alone. This was a coordinated attack on his empire. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. He thought of calling the police immediately. Then he stopped himself. Elena was right about one thing. This evidence alone wouldn't be enough. Poisoning cases required exhumation, autopsy, toxicology, and by then she'd have time to run, to destroy evidence, to ensure the trail led nowhere. No, he needed something more damning. He pulled out his phone and called Rosa Marinello, the only person he could trust. She answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting. "You found it," Rosa said, not a question. "Everything, and more. Elena isn't acting alone." "I know," Rosa said quietly. "Marcus, there's something else you need to know about me. Something that will explain why I came to that wedding and why I can help you now." She paused. "I'm Catherine's mother, and Elena didn't just steal your wife's life, she stole mine." The revelation hung in the silence between them. Marcus finally understood. This wasn't just about avenging Catherine anymore. It was about Catherine's family. It was personal. And everything was about to change. Rosa arrived at the mansion before dawn, moving through the shadows like someone who'd learned long ago how to disappear. Marcus met her in his study, the USB drive still on the desk between them. For the first time, he saw Catherine in Rosa's face, the same sharp cheekbones, the same determined set to her jaw. But where Catherine had been gentle, Rosa was steel. "How long have you known?" Marcus asked. "Since Catherine started getting sick. She called me, terrified, saying something was wrong but couldn't prove it." Rosa's voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she picked up the USB. "I told her to leave you, to come stay with me, but she refused. She said she loved you too much to abandon you while you were being hunted." Marcus felt the words like a physical blow. "She was protecting me," he said. "She was dying for you," Rosa corrected, "and you didn't even know it was happening." The accusation stung because it was true. He'd been so consumed with his empire, so lost in his own ambitions, that he'd missed his wife slowly being poisoned in their own home. "We can't undo the past," Rosa continued, "but we can ensure it means something. Elena has to answer for what she did, and whoever sent her has to burn." Marcus pulled up the recordings again, fast-forwarding to a conversation between Elena and an unknown man on a phone call. "The timeline is accelerating. He's becoming suspicious. We need to move to phase 2. "Catherine's death should have broken him completely," the male voice replied. "Instead, he's burying himself in work. This won't work unless he's emotionally devastated. Then we give him time to grieve, and when he's at his lowest, I'll be there, a grieving widow seeking comfort. He'll marry me within a year, I guarantee it." Rosa leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the speaker. "That voice," she whispered. "I know that voice." Rosa's face had gone pale. She played the recording again, then a third time, her jaw clenching tighter with each listen. "Who is it?" Marcus asked. "Vittorio Rossi, Elena's father. He's a crime boss from Naples, runs trafficking operations across Europe. More dangerous than anyone in your organization, Marcus. More ruthless." Marcus stood, processing. Why would Elena's father want my empire destroyed? Because you refused his expansion in Chicago 5 years ago. Because you were the only boss who wouldn't compromise, wouldn't bend. Rosa met his eyes. Because men like Vittorio don't accept rejection, they engineer revenge. The pieces clicked into place. Elena wasn't just a woman, she was a weapon, carefully designed and deployed. Everything, the chance meeting, the kindness, the emotional connection, it had all been fabricated. "There's more," Rosa continued, pulling out her phone. She showed him a photograph of a man in his 60s, sharp-featured and cold-eyed. "I've been investigating Vittorio for years. After Catherine died, I couldn't prove Elena's involvement, but I watched her, documented her movements. She has regular meetings with a man named Dr. Marcello Giordano, a specialist in toxicology and poisons." "She's planning something else," Marcus realized. "Elena said Phase 2. "Exactly. Catherine was Phase 1, to break you emotionally. Phase 2 is probably marriage. Phase 3? Rosa trailed off. Phase 3 is probably your death. Once you're married, she inherits everything. Once you're dead, she controls the Santoro empire and can merge it with Vittorio's organization." Marcus walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline glittering in the pre-dawn darkness. For 3 years, he'd thought his wife's death was fate, bad luck, a cruel twist of God's will. Instead, it had been calculated murder. "We need to move carefully," he said quietly. "If I arrest Elena now, Vittorio disappears. We need to catch them all at once." "How?" Rosa asked. Marcus turned back to her, and for the first time since Catherine died, his eyes held something other than grief. They held purpose. "We give Elena exactly what she wants. We let her think her plan is working." Over the next week, Marcus played the part of the infatuated new husband perfectly. He showered her with attention, took her to expensive dinners, introduced him to his inner circle. To anyone watching, he was a grieving man who'd finally found happiness again. But behind closed doors, he was building a trap. He contacted Detective Sarah Chen, a woman he'd known before he entered the underworld, someone whose integrity hadn't been corrupted by the system. He showed Catherine's recordings in secret, along with the toxicology reports Rosa had obtained. "This is enough for an exhumation," Sarah said, studying the evidence. "But you're right, if we move too fast, the others involved will scatter." "I need you to wait," Marcus told her. "Elena is expecting to move forward with Phase 2. She'll make contact with her father, with this Dr. Giordano. When she does, I need to be listening." Sarah agreed, though it cost her, going against protocol, bending the rules in ways that could end her career. But she'd known Catherine, had attended her funeral, and always suspected something wasn't right about the sudden death. Marcus installed surveillance in his home. He learned Elena's routines, her phone passwords, the times she spoke freely with her conspirators. He discovered that Phase 2 wasn't just about marriage, it was about producing an heir. Vittorio wanted a grandchild, wanted his bloodline mixed with the Santoro name, wanted the next generation of his empire built on a foundation of murder. One evening, Elena came to him in the study, running her fingers along his shoulders. "I have wonderful news," she said softly. "I'm pregnant." Marcus's stomach turned. He took her hand and kissed it, playing the role. "This is perfect timing," she continued. "Once the baby arrives, you'll be so focused on family that you won't notice when your empire starts to crumble." She laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. That night, Marcus called an emergency meeting with his most trusted lieutenants. He didn't tell them about Elena, not yet. Instead, he told them the truth about Vittorio Rossi's expansion plans, about the conspiracy against the Santoro name. "We're going to war," he told them, "but first, we need to understand our enemy from the inside." By morning, his men had infiltrated Vittorio's organization in Chicago. They had names, addresses, financial records. They had the architecture of the conspiracy laid bare. All that remained was to spring the trap. The courtroom was packed. Media outlets had latched onto the story with frenzy. Mafia boss's wife poisoned by his new bride, made for compelling television. Marcus sat behind the prosecution table, watching as Elena was led in wearing a tailored black suit designed to make her look vulnerable, innocent. Her lawyer was expensive, the best money could buy. His name was Alexander Sterling, a man who'd successfully defended 3 harders in the past decade. He knew how to manipulate juries, how to twist evidence into reasonable doubt. The prosecution's case was strong. Catherine's recordings, the financial trail, Dr. Giordano's confession made in exchange for a reduced sentence. But a strong case and a conviction were different things. Elena's strategy became clear during her testimony. She cried. She claimed coercion. She said her father had threatened her family, that she was a victim of his manipulation, that she never intended for Catherine to die. She painted herself as a frightened young woman caught between a controlling father and a man she genuinely cared about. The jury seemed sympathetic. Marcus watched their faces, saw the subtle shifts as Elena wove her narrative of victimhood. During cross-examination, the prosecutor, a sharp woman named Jennifer Walsh, pressed hard. "Ms. Rossi, you told Dr. Giordano to increase Catherine Fontaine's dosage, correct?" "I was following my father's orders," Elena replied softly. "You visited the clinic 17 times over 8 months. Were you following orders each time?" "I was afraid of what my father would do if I refused." "Yet you had the freedom to meet Marcus Santoro, to seduce him, to build an elaborate deception. You weren't so constrained then, were you?" Elena didn't answer immediately. For a moment, the mask slipped, a flash of anger, of arrogance. Then it returned, the fragile victim expression settling back into place. The jury didn't see that flash, or if they did, they chose not to believe it mattered. When the verdict came back after 4 days of deliberation, it was a compromise. Guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, not guilty of murder itself. 15 years, with parole possible after 10. Marcus felt the injustice like a physical blow. Elena had poisoned his wife, watched her die, and seduced him into marriage, and she might walk free in a decade. Rosa gripped his arm. "There's still appeal," she whispered. "Still time to—" "The system failed," Marcus said quietly, "just like I failed Catherine." Vittorio's trial was shorter, more brutal. He didn't have Elena's gift for tears and manipulation. Instead, his lawyers attacked the evidence, questioned chain of custody, suggested that Marcus had fabricated the recordings to destroy a business rival. But Dominic Russo's testimony was the turning point. On the stand, Dominic detailed everything: the payments, the information he'd provided, the conversations with Vittorio about accelerating Elena's timeline. He described Vittorio's specific instructions regarding the poison, the dosage, the timeline. He painted a picture of calculated, methodical murder orchestrated by a man sitting in the courtroom. Vittorio's face remained impassive throughout, but his jaw tightened when Dominic described overhearing Vittorio laugh about Catherine's death. She was too curious, always asking questions. Elena said she was becoming difficult to manage. The jury took 2 days. Guilty on all counts. Life without parole. Vittorio showed no emotion as the verdict was read. He simply stood, adjusted his tie, and allowed the officers to lead him away. As he passed Marcus, he smiled, a thin, cold thing. "This changes nothing," Vittorio said quietly. "My organization continues. And Marcus, you should know, there are consequences for humiliating a man like me." Detective Chen moved to intervene, but Vittorio was already gone. That threat haunted Marcus more than any conviction ever could. Vittorio was correct. Putting him in prison hadn't eliminated the threat, it had merely transformed it. Over the next weeks, Marcus's businesses began experiencing problems. Shipments were hijacked. Business partners suddenly backed out of deals. 2 of his lieutenants were found with bullet wounds. warning shots that could have easily been fatal. The war wasn't over. If anything, it had only entered a new phase. Marcus called Rosa to his office late one evening. "Your father's organization is retaliating," he told her. "I need to know what you want to do." Rosa was silent for a long moment, looking at photographs of Catherine on his desk. "My daughter's death was avenged in court, but the system gave her murderer a chance at freedom. That's not justice. That's insult added to tragedy." She met his eyes. "I want to help you make sure Vittorio never leaves that prison. I want to make sure his organization crumbles, and I want Elena to understand that 10 years is 10 years too long to live with hope." Marcus understood what she was asking, what she was offering. "This crosses a line," he said. "Once we do this, there's no going back." "Catherine's already dead," Rosa replied quietly. "The only question is whether her death means anything." Marcus and Rosa's plan was sophisticated and merciless. They didn't move against Elena directly. Instead, they targeted Vittorio's organization from within. Using connections and money, they planted their own people in key positions. They fed false information about shipments and operations. They orchestrated disputes between rival factions, escalating tensions until violence erupted. Within months, Vittorio's operation in North America had fractured into civil war. In prison, Vittorio received reports of his empire collapsing. Marcus made sure he received accurate accounts, names of men defecting, territories lost, revenue streams cut off. Marcus wanted Vittorio to understand, day by day, that everything he'd built was crumbling. As for Elena, Marcus took a different approach. He visited her in prison, something that shocked her. She was in minimum security, maintaining her carriage of victimhood, believing her 10-year sentence was survivable. Marcus sat across from her in the visitation room, his expression unreadable. "Your father's asking about you," Marcus said. "He's concerned about your welfare." Elena's face brightened slightly. "Is he? Will he try to get my sentence reduced?" "No," Marcus said coldly. "He's concerned because he knows you're a liability. You know too much. You could testify against him in future trials." He leaned forward. "And he's realized something your lawyers didn't tell you. The evidence I preserved, Catherine's recordings, her letter, they're not just enough for one trial, they're enough for multiple prosecutions. Federal charges, state charges. Your immunity deal was dependent on your father's cooperation. Now that he's imprisoned and his organization is being dismantled, the prosecutors are reconsidering that deal." Elena's face went pale. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that within 6 months you'll face additional charges. Premeditated murder instead of conspiracy. The death penalty is still on the table in Illinois for certain cases." "That's not possible. My lawyer said—" "Your lawyers were protecting your father's interests, not yours. You were always expendable, Elena. Your father chose you for this mission precisely because he could afford to lose you." Marcus stood to leave. "You have time to decide whether you want to testify against Vittorio in exchange for a reduced sentence, or whether you want to spend the rest of your life in prison hoping for parole that will never come." As he walked away, Elena's composed facade shattered. She screamed, clawed at the table, demanding he return. Marcus didn't look back. 6 months after Vittorio's imprisonment, his organization had effectively ceased to exist. His legitimate businesses were seized by federal authorities. His trafficking networks were dismantled. His allies, sensing a sinking ship, had jumped to rival organizations. What remained was a hollow empire, kept alive only by memory. Elena agreed to testify against her father in exchange for a life sentence instead of the death penalty. Her testimony was methodical and damning, detailing Vittorio's plans with clinical precision. She showed no remorse, only the calculation of someone maximizing her survival. Watching her testify, Marcus realized something unsettling. He'd won. The people responsible for Catherine's death were imprisoned or destroyed. Justice, in the way he'd orchestrated it, was complete. But when he returned home that evening, the victory felt hollow. The mansion was quiet, too quiet. Marcus poured himself a drink, something he'd been doing more frequently, and stood in Catherine's room, which he'd finally allowed himself to enter without overwhelming grief. Her things were still there, clothes she'd never wear again, books marked with her notes in the margins, a watercolor painting she'd done of the garden, unfinished. Marcus had spent 3 years angry at Catherine for dying, then angry at Elena for killing her, then angry at the system for failing to deliver adequate punishment. But now, sitting in this room, he realized the anger had been easier than facing the fundamental truth. Catherine was gone. No amount of conviction or revenge would change that. Rosa found him there an hour later, sitting in the dark. "You're having second thoughts," Rosa said. It wasn't a question. "I'm realizing that we've become something just as dark as what we destroyed," Marcus said quietly. "We manipulated trials, we orchestrated violence, we played God with people's lives." Rosa sat down beside him. "Yes." "Doesn't that bother you?" "Terribly," Rosa said. "But Catherine is still dead, and the people responsible for her death are imprisoned. The question isn't whether we were moral in our methods. The question is whether Catherine's death means something now, or whether we let it be forgotten while we feel righteous about maintaining our principles." Marcus closed his eyes. "There has to be a middle ground." "There usually is," Rosa said, "but you had to walk to the extreme to understand where it was." 3 weeks later, Detective Sarah Chen came to Marcus with a proposition. "I've been offered a position with the FBI," Chen said. "Organized crime unit. They want me to lead a task force targeting Mafia operations across the Midwest." Marcus understood what she wasn't saying directly. "And you're telling me this because—" "Because I want you to consider legitimacy," Chen said bluntly. "You've won your war. You've destroyed your enemy. Now you have a choice. You can spend the rest of your life managing an empire built on crime, always looking over your shoulder, always waiting for the next threat. Or you can dismantle it." "And do what?" "Transform," Chen said. Catherine's trust fund was substantial. The recordings she left behind are now public record. They've made international news. You're being painted as a victim, a man who was betrayed. You have sympathy, Marcus. You have opportunity. Use it." Marcus listened as Chen outlined a vision of transformation. Not redemption, he was too pragmatic to believe in that, but redirection, using the Santoro name and resources to fund legitimate enterprises, creating foundations in Catherine's name, becoming a man Catherine might have wanted him to be. "If I do this," Marcus said, "the people depending on the Santoro organization for their livelihoods will suffer." "Some will," Chen acknowledged. "Others will find legitimate work. The world will be better for one less criminal empire, even if the transition is painful." After Chen left, Marcus called his remaining lieutenants to a meeting, men who'd been with him for years, who'd made fortunes from illegal enterprise, who now faced a choice. "I'm stepping back," Marcus announced. "Over the next 2 years, we're transitioning to legitimate business, shipping, real estate, investments. Anyone who wants to stay will be taken care of. Anyone who wants to leave and pursue other opportunities, whether legal or otherwise, won't be stopped." The reaction was mixed. Some nodded, understanding that the tide was shifting. Others looked angry, feeling betrayed. One man, Carmine, spoke for many. "You're abandoning us because of some woman's ghost?" Carmine demanded. "No," Marcus said quietly. "I'm abandoning this life because Catherine asked me to be better, and I was too blind to listen while she was alive. I won't ignore that voice now that she's gone." Carmine stood abruptly. "Then you're a fool, and the Santoro name will mean nothing." He left, and several others followed. 6 months into the transition, Marcus stood in the empty building that would become the Catherine Fontaine Memorial Foundation, dedicated to supporting families affected by organized crime, providing legal aid, housing, and counseling for victims of violence. Rosa was there, overseeing the architectural plans. She'd become an unexpected partner in this new venture, using her grief as fuel to help others. The first clients arrive next week, Rosa said, showing him the intake forms. 43 families, women whose husbands were killed in gang violence, children traumatized by organized crime, people the system failed. Marcus read through the files, seeing his past reflected in their stories. Lives destroyed by the world he'd inhabited, by choices men like him had made. "We'll need staff," Marcus said. "I've already recruited some, social workers, lawyers, trauma counselors, and I want to hire people with direct experience, former gang members trying to leave the life, women who've survived abuse, people who understand the world these families are coming from." As they walked through the empty building, Marcus imagined it filled, imagined the lives that would be changed, the futures that would be redirected. His phone buzzed, a message from Detective Chen. "Vittorio Rossi died in prison today, stabbed by another inmate. Seems his daughter's testimony made him unpopular." Marcus read the message twice, felt no satisfaction, no sense of closure. Vittorio's death made nothing. It prevented nothing. "Everything all right?" Rosa asked, noticing his expression. "Vittorio's dead, murdered in prison." Rosa was quiet for a moment. "Does it matter?" "No," Amit admitted. "A month ago I might have felt vindicated. Now I just feel tired." They continued walking through the empty space, planning the layout for counseling rooms, administrative offices, a children's area decorated with murals and soft lighting. "Catherine would have loved this," Rosa said softly. "I think so too," Marcus replied. For the first time since Catherine's death, Marcus felt something approaching peace. Not forgetting, not moving on, really, but rather allowing her death to matter in a way that honored who she'd been, compassionate, generous, hopeful about humanity's capacity for change. The foundation would be her legacy, not vengeance, not the dark machinery of his revenge, but something alive and healing, changing lives the way Catherine had changed his.
2 years after opening the Catherine Fontaine Memorial Foundation, Marcus had become a different kind of public figure. No longer a mafia boss, but a philanthropist. The transformation wasn't complete. Parts of him would always carry the ruthlessness of his previous life, but the trajectory was unmistakable. The foundation had helped over 300 families. It was expanding to other cities. Universities were studying its model. On a Tuesday afternoon, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. Elena Rossi was released on parole, not because her sentence had been reduced, but because of a legal technicality. Her original plea agreement had been made under duress, which meant her entire conviction was subject to review. After a lengthy appeals process, she'd been freed with time served. Marcus learned this from Detective Chen, who came to warn him. "She's requested a meeting with you," Chen said. "I'm obligated to tell you that. I'm also obligated to tell you that if anything happens to her, you're the prime suspect." "I have no intention of harming her," Marcus said truthfully. He meant it. Harming Elena would mean returning to the man he'd been, and that version of Marcus no longer existed. But curiosity pulled at him. What could Elena possibly want? They met in a public place, a coffee shop near the foundation. Elena looked different, smaller somehow. Prison had carved away her beauty, leaving something harder and more angular. Her blonde hair had darkened, and there was a watchfulness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Thank you for seeing me," Elena said, sitting across from him. "I'm curious," I admitted. "Why contact me?" "Because I wanted you to know something. During my time in prison, I had a lot of time to think. About Catherine, about what I did." Elena's voice was steady, but there was something underneath it, Genuine remorse or simply sophisticated manipulation, Marcus couldn't determine which. I destroyed a woman's life. I destroyed yours. I did it all for my father, believing that his approval meant something. She paused. It didn't. After I testified against him, he never once tried to contact me. My own father, and I meant nothing to him. Marcus said nothing, waiting. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Alina continued. I know what I am. What I did was unforgivable. But I wanted you to know that Catherine's death haunts me. Every day I see her face. Every day I remember her kindness to me when I was building the deception. That's the person I destroyed. Marcus studied her face, trying to read the truth beneath the words. Was this genuine, or was this another performance, another manipulation? What do you want from me? He asked finally. Nothing, Alina said. I just wanted you to know that someone who is part of destroying your life carries that weight, that actions have consequences, even for the person committing them. She stood to leave. Your foundation, Alina said at the door. I've been following its work. The families you've helped, the lives you've changed, that's the legacy Catherine should have had. That's what Catherine deserved. I'm glad, at least, that something good came from her death. Then she was gone.
Rosa didn't handle news of Elena's release well. She's free? Rosa's voice was sharp with anger. After what she did? After poisoning my daughter? Technically, yes, Marcus said. They were in his office at the foundation, surrounded by files of families they'd helped. The legal system released her. The legal system is broken, Rosa spat, just like we always knew it was. Marcus didn't disagree, but he also recognized something else, that Rosa's anger had calcified into something destructive. For 2 years, she'd channeled her grief into work, into helping others, into creating meaning from tragedy. But Elena's release threatened to pull her back toward vengeance. I met with her, Marcus said quietly. What? Why? Marcus, she could have... She wanted to apologize, Marcus said. I don't know if it was genuine. I probably never will. But I realized something listening to her. We gave her power by hating her. We gave her relevance by pursuing revenge. The only way to truly defeat someone like Elena is to stop giving them power over our lives. Rosa's expression hardened. That's a convenient philosophy for a man who already got his revenge. I'm right, Marcus acknowledged. I'm not pretending to be noble about this. I've already destroyed Vittorio's empire. I've already orchestrated Elena's imprisonment. I've already done the things I needed to do. Now I'm trying to live with the consequences of those actions. Rosa turned away from him, looking out the window at the street below. Catherine loved you deeply. She didn't just love the man you were. She loved the man she saw you could become. She believed in your capacity to change, even when you didn't believe it in yourself. I know, Marcus said. I want to honor that, Rosa continued. I want to believe that my daughter's death led to something meaningful. But it's hard, Marcus. Some days it's so hard. Marcus crossed the room and stood beside her. Then we honor it together, he said. We don't forget, we don't forgive what can't be forgiven, but we redirect the pain into something that saves lives instead of destroying them. Rosa's nodded slowly, tears sliding silently down her face. 3 years after Catherine's death, 4 years after her murder was discovered, the foundation held a memorial event. Hundreds of people attended, families who'd been helped, social workers and volunteers, members of the local government and business community. And Rosa, standing beside a portrait of Catherine painted by a local artist. In the painting, Catherine smiled with the warmth that had characterized her life, genuine kindness, unmarked by the darkness that would ultimately claim her. Marcus gave a speech that day. He talked about Catherine without sentimentality, without performing grief for the cameras. He spoke about her intelligence, her compassion, her refusal to judge people for the circumstances of their birth or the mistakes they'd made. My wife was killed by people who believed the world was a zero-sum game. They believed that for them to win, others had to lose. They believed that love was transactional, that trust was weakness, that compassion was a liability. He paused, letting his gaze move across the faces watching him. If you're watching this, if you're someone trapped in the world of organized crime, if you're someone contemplating revenge, if you're someone who believes that violence is the only language the world understands, I want you to know there's another way. There's a harder way, but there's another way. Catherine Fontaine lived that way. She died for believing in it, and I'm dedicating my life to proving she was right. That evening, after the crowds had dispersed, Marcus and Rosa sat in the foundation's garden. It had been designed by Catherine's favorite landscape architect, filled with roses and jasmine and flowering trees. In the center was a small fountain with Catherine's name engraved on a bronze plaque. "Do you think she'd be proud?" Rosa asked. Marcus considered the question carefully. "I think Catherine would understand that we did the best we could with the choices we made. That's all any of us can hope for." Rosa smiled through her tears. "Catherine would want you to be happy, Marcus, to find love again, to build a life that wasn't defined by grief or vengeance." "I know," Marcus said, and he was beginning to believe it might be possible. 6 months after the memorial event, Marcus received a letter. The envelope bore no return address, only his name written in careful handwriting. Inside was a single page, dated a week prior. "Marcus, I'm writing this from a hospital bed. The doctors tell me I have 3 months, maybe 4. Cancer. The kind that doesn't care about your past, your accomplishments, or your regrets. I wanted to reach out before I'm gone. Not for forgiveness, I stopped asking for that years ago, but to tell you something I've carried since the day Catherine died. When I was giving her the poison, I saw something in her eyes. Not fear, not anger. Recognition. She knew what was happening, and she made a choice to keep taking the supplements anyway. I asked her why once, when I was alone with her, cruel enough to want to understand. She told me she was buying time. Time for you to figure things out. Time for you to become the man she believed you could be. She said that if she died, at least her death might mean something, might wake you up in ways that living never could. I didn't understand then. I was too young, too corrupted by my father's worldview. But sitting here now, watching my own life end, I finally understand what Catherine understood. We don't get to choose our circumstances. We only get to choose what meaning we assign to them. Catherine chose to make her death meaningful. I chose to make mine meaningless, serving my father's ambitions. You chose to make yours redemptive. I hope you continue making that choice. Elena. Marcus read the letter 3 times, sitting alone in his office as evening fell outside. He didn't know if it was genuine. Part of him suspected it might be another manipulation, a final performance designed to haunt him. But another part recognized the weight of truth in the words. He called Detective Chen. "Can you verify if Elena Rossi is terminally ill?" he asked. Chen made calls. Within an hour she had an answer. "She is. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. She checked into hospice care 3 weeks ago under an assumed name. The medical records confirm the diagnosis." "Thank you," he said, and ended the call. That night, Marcus didn't sleep. He sat with Catherine's letter, the one he'd found in the music box, and read it alongside Elena's final message. 2 women, separated by circumstance and choice, both trying to reach him across time. Catherine knew. Somehow, in those final months of poisoning, she'd understood her fate and had chosen to endure it because she believed in him. The weight of that knowledge was almost unbearable. Marcus drove to the hospice care facility on a gray morning. Elena's room was on the 3rd floor, overlooking a small garden where dying patients could watch birds and trees as their own lives wound down. Elena was asleep when he entered. She had lost significant weight. Her blonde hair had fallen out from chemotherapy, and she wore a soft cap. The woman in the bed looked nothing like the predatory seductress she'd known. She looked like what she was, a human being approaching the end. Her eyes opened as she sat down. "You came," Elena whispered. "I wanted to understand," Marcus said. "The letter, was it true?" "Which part? That Catherine knew? Yes. That I poisoned her anyway? Yes. That I regret it now? Also yes. All of it can be true simultaneously, Marcus. That's what took me so long to understand." She coughed, a thin, painful sound. "My father told me that remorse was weakness, that guilt was something only weak people felt. I spent my life believing that, but weakness and strength are more complicated than he knew." "Why are you telling me this now?" Marcus asked. "Because I'm going to die," Elena said simply. "And when you die, the things you thought mattered stop mattering. The only thing that matters is whether you hurt people, whether your existence left the world better or worse than you found it." She looked at him directly. "I made the world worse, Marcus. Catherine made it better. You're trying to make it better now. In a way, we're both serving her legacy, me through my death, you through your life." Marcus didn't respond. There was nothing to say to that. "Don't waste time hating me," Elena continued. "Don't waste time on vengeance or anger. It's all so pointless when you're facing the end. The only thing that matters is love, the people you cherish, the lives you save. That's all that survives us." Over the next 3 months, Marcus visited Elena regularly, not out of forgiveness, but out of a strange sense of obligation. Catherine had wanted to save him. Elena, in her final days, was trying to do the same thing, trying to warn him away from the bitterness that threatened to consume him. They talked about books and philosophy and what came after death. Elena never asked for absolution. She only asked to be remembered as someone who, at the very end, tried to be better. Elena died on a Tuesday morning in late autumn. Marcus was there, holding her hand as she took her final breath. It was quiet, peaceful, nothing like the violent ends she had caused others to meet. He arranged her funeral, simple, attended by only a handful of people. The Foundation's chaplain said words about redemption and the human capacity for growth even in the final moments. Afterwards, Marcus returned to the Foundation and continued the work. A woman named Teresa came through the doors that week. She'd left a violent gang after her brother was killed in retaliation violence. She had no job skills, no high school diploma, no support system. The Foundation hired her, trained her, gave her a second chance. A month later, Marcus hired Dominic Russo, the man who'd betrayed him, who'd cooperated with prosecutors, who'd spent 2 years in protective custody before being released. The man bore the weight of his treachery visibly, in the permanent downward turn of his mouth, in the way he flinched when loud noises occurred. "Why hire me?" Dominic asked, genuinely confused. "Because Catherine would have," Marcus said simply. "Because everyone deserves a chance to rebuild. Because the Foundation exists to prove that people can change." Dominic wept at his desk for the first day of work. Rosa became the Foundation's director of client services, her maternal instinct channeled into helping families navigate the systems designed to support them. She had a gift for seeing people, for understanding what they needed beyond what they asked for. Years passed. The Foundation expanded to 5 cities. It helped thousands of families. It became a model for other nonprofits. University social work programs studied its methodology. And Marcus slowly began to heal. He still thought of Catherine every day, but the thoughts were less painful now, less colored by rage. They were memories of a woman he'd loved, of a woman's belief in him that had changed the trajectory of his life. 10 years after Catherine's death, Marcus stood before the expanded Foundation headquarters on a sunny afternoon. The building was named the Catherine Fontaine Center for Redemption and Healing. Above the entrance was her photograph, smiling that genuine smile that had won the hearts of everyone who'd known her. Rosa stood beside him, her hair now fully gray, her face lined with the kindness that comes from years of helping others. She'd never remarried after Catherine's father died. Instead, she'd poured her love into the work, into the families they served, into ensuring that Catherine's death meant something. "We've helped over 10,000 people," Rosa read from the anniversary report. "Provided housing to 4,000, secured jobs for 7,000, educated 1,200 children, prevented 43 suicides." She looked at Marcus. "Do you think it's enough? Do you think Catherine would say it's enough?" Marcus considered the question. Catherine would say it's never enough, that there's always more to do. But she'd also say that the effort itself matters, that trying to be better, even when the task is impossible, is what separates us from the people who hurt her. That evening, at the anniversary gala, hundreds of people who'd been touched by the foundation gathered to celebrate. There were politicians and celebrities, but mostly they were ordinary people, single mothers who'd rebuilt their lives, former gang members now employed in legitimate work, children who'd escaped violence and found safety. A young woman approached Marcus. She was perhaps 18, with intelligent eyes and a determined set to her jaw. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "My mother came to your foundation 5 years ago. She was broken, traumatized. Today she's a counselor here. She helps other women escape abusive situations, and I'm going to college to study social work because of what this place did for her." Marcus felt something warm expand in his chest. Not happiness, exactly, but something close. Purpose. The knowledge that Catherine's death had created a ripple, had touched lives in ways neither of them could have predicted. As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself alone on the building's rooftop, looking out over the city. Chicago glittered below him, indifferent to the stories of redemption and loss The Mafia boss who had been stunned at his wedding had learned something no amount of power, fear, or money could ever teach him, that love can outlive death, that redemption is earned through action, not words, and that even the darkest tragedy can be transformed into light. As the wind brushed against the rooftop, Marcus Santoro closed his eyes and imagined Catherine smiling, not in pain, not in sorrow, but in quiet pride. And for the first time in his life, he knew he had finally become the man she believed he could be.